Welcome to the Healing Healthcare Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley O'Connor. I'm a registered nurse turned holistic health coach and personal trainer for my fellow nurses and healthcare workers on a mission to help you feel your best in a world that's telling you to put yourself last. This is a space where nurses can come together to understand that their identity extends beyond the humans that they care for, where the hardest workers in the room can have honest and authentic conversations about what is holding them back and the changes needed to move forward. I am here to help you fit nutrition, fitness, and self-care into a life built around 12-hour shifts. Each week, we will spend time diving into the research, searching for evidence-based strategies, connecting with experts, and asking the big questions so that we can build a life we love in and outside of the hospital. If you are ready to step into the new era of nursing and help me heal healthcare, then you are in the right place. Let's dive in. What is up, friends? We're here to talk about time management today. 2 words that are kind of burned into the brain of every single nurse that I've ever talked to, because we hear it in nursing school. We hear it when we become a nurse. Even when we're seasoned nurses, time management is a conversation we are always having. And part of that is because of the way our system is built. We want to be able to fit as much as we can into the time that we have so that we can take more patients and do more procedures and whatever. So there is that kind of hustle mentality behind the reason why we hear so much about time management, but also it's because we want to be able to enable nurses to have the skills they need to complete their tasks in the window that they need to complete them in, and be able to kind of juggle a whole lot of different things because we wear a lot of hats. So time management is really important. And I'm going to give you a few things that will be helpful for you at the hospital, and I hope also at home, because these skills should be transferable. These should not just be skills that serve you in a hospital. They also should be skills that can serve you at home. That was actually a big struggle for me. When I became an entrepreneur, I really struggled with my time management. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? Because you could put me in a hospital and I would manage my time in such a orchestrated and clear way when I was in a hospital. Like while I'm taking care of patients, my time management is on point. But at home, I struggled and didn't know where the time went. So I really had to practice using these skills at home because in my brain, I think I really just placed them in the realm of nursing and didn't even think of how they could serve me in my life outside of nursing as well. And this question actually comes from one of your questions. So, honestly, more than one of your questions. I hear about time management fairly frequently, and I was having these questions kind of pop up again in the DMs, having conversations, and thought, you know what, we need to talk about this on the podcast as well so that everyone can share the knowledge and that hopefully we can also share advice with each other. So if you are not already following on Instagram, make sure that you are over at Health Coach for Nurses and share your own insight on this, because I would love to be able to share that with the group. Like, we all need to be better at sharing our knowledge instead of hoarding that knowledge. So first things first, I want to talk about the signs that you might be struggling with time management, because sometimes we don't even realize that that's the issue. We might blame our intelligence. We might blame our abilities. We might blame all sorts of different things and not realize that at the core of it all is just time management. You aren't stupid. You aren't a bad nurse. We just need to nail down your time management skills. So this is extraordinarily common. We all go through it, and it's just part of learning the job. And so especially for my new nurses, this is just a key piece that you are going to get. It's just going to take practice. So some of the signs that you might need to work on your time management are things like staying after your shift to finish catching up on charting because you couldn't do it during your shift. You didn't have time to catch up, and so you're there an hour or more afterwards. Being unable to finish the important tasks that you planned on doing during your shift and then just having to give them or pass them on to day shift. Now, that can happen sometimes if you have a crazy shift. Like, it's okay if that happens every once in a while. But if it's happening frequently, that could be a sign that the time management piece is something we can work on. Maybe scrambling to try and get everything done at the end of your shift and kind of feeling like a chicken with your head cut off, like running around trying to do a billion things at once because you're out of time. And even if you just don't start charting until like 2 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, depending on what shift you're working, if you haven't charted a single thing until 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., that may be a sign that we're running behind or that we're out of time, especially if that's happening frequently. That's the thing with each of those. I don't want you to panic if you occasionally are staying late or occasionally there's some things that are being passed on to day shift, or it's your first week on your own and you're, not getting a handle on this. It's okay. Take a breath. Like, that is totally normal. It's really if we start to notice this is a pattern. I think that's always what we want to pick up on. What are the patterns of behavior that aren't working for us? Because any of the things I just outlined, they don't feel good. And that is what we want to avoid. You shouldn't have to feel panicked and stressed every moment of your life as a nurse. It can feel like flow once we kind of get a routine down, even on the crazy shifts. So really just keep an eye out for how you're feeling. I really think that a sign of poor time management skills is constant stress and anxiety during your shift, feeling like you're running out of time or you're constantly behind. That is a big red flag. So I'm just going to share a few things that I hope you can take with you onto your shifts and at home. And part of this is my knowledge, what I learned as a nurse, but also the knowledge that I gathered from all of the nurses that mentored me and also from this community. So I reached out and asked some of the seasoned nurses that I know and some of the nurses I trust, like, what are your tips? What works for you? And I kind of compiled them into a short list that I hope you can just take with you and start to apply and see how it makes you feel and see if it kind of works for you. Some of these things will work for you and some of them won't. That is always going to be the case. Any podcast, any advice that you are taking from people, I want you to realize that you have to always take it with a grain of salt because you are a different human. So with any advice you're getting from people, just take what you need and leave the rest behind. So the first thing that was really helpful for me when I was a new grad nurse is that I was always struggling to kind of get my charting done at a decent time. And I had no gauge of what a good time to get it done was. Like, I didn't know what a goal should even be as a brand new nurse because I'd never done it before. And one of my preceptors, she set a goal for me. So she had a goal for me to finish all of my charting, like all of the morning charting, and kind of be caught up by 11 a.m. or 11 p.m. Whenever you're working. At my time, it was 11 p.m. So it was having my assessments in and my up-to-date vitals and kind of all the things that we had to chart in the ICU, being caught up by 11. That was her goal for me. And I struggled with it at first, but I at least had an idea of when I should be done. And so I could start to try and implement things to help me get it done faster, or I would be a little bit better at prioritizing it and being like, ooh, I have 5 minutes. Let me chart a couple things because I have this goal. So that's really the first piece. And it is the simplest thing in the whole universe. But this is true as a nurse and at home. You have to set some type of goal so that you know what you're working for. Because if we just kind of are floating around trying to manage our time better and we don't set any goals, we're just going to continue to float around and then get to the end of the day and be like, what did I even do? Or get to the end of the shift and feel like we're scrambling and that we have no time to get the things done that we need to. And so if you're a nurse listening and you're working in the hospital, like, maybe just try this goal on for size. About 4 hours into your shift, in whatever shift you're working, try and be caught up on your charting. And that might be completely unrealistic for your unit. It might work for you. It might be even way too slow for you, but try it on. Give yourself something. Or if you are a new grad nurse and you have a preceptor that you can talk to, ask them what an appropriate goal is. Because if you're working on a med-surg floor and you have like 6 or 7 patients, 11 or 4 hours into your shift might be completely unrealistic. I don't know because I haven't worked that shift. But the key is we need to set a goal for you and start to stick with it and see what small behaviors we can change to fit that goal or meet the goal. And this is true at home too, okay? So like if we take this same idea and say, by this time, I want to have completed this. Set some type of goal at the beginning of your day, or maybe it's at the beginning of your week. You have goals for what you want to achieve in that week, and you need deadlines. If we don't have deadlines, we will just float around and use up all of our time until we have none of it. At least if you're like me, this is what I do. So if I have no deadlines, which as an entrepreneur, I'm the one making the deadlines. And so in the beginning, I didn't set any. And so I just kind of existed and tried to get things done. I had no direction. I didn't know which tasks were most important to complete. Even if it was like household stuff, like I got to do the laundry, I got to do the dishes, the plants need to be watered this time. Like if I didn't have goals or time windows or deadlines or anything, I would find myself at the end of a day, at the end of a week, just being like, what did I even do? And I felt so stressed because every task was just kind of floating around in space and I didn't even know where to start. We need goals. That's the key here. So for my new grads, for my seasoned nurses even, like set a goal for something that you want to get better on when it comes to your time management. Maybe it's that you want your bed baths done by 2 a.m. or whatever time is right for you. Like set some goals and start to try and meet them and celebrate when you do. And you'll slowly get better at the time management piece. And for my new grads and my new nurses, I want you to just realize that tasks are going to take you longer in the beginning. You will get faster at them, and that is also going to improve your time management. So I really want you to work on giving yourself a little bit of grace at the beginning because it's going to feel frustrating. You might not fit or meet your goals right away because spiking an IV bag or taking out the meds or starting an IV or your assessment, all of it is going to take you longer. And so we need to make sure that we account for that time that it's going to take. So for your preceptor, getting all the charting and all the things done by 11 might be appropriate for them. In your first couple months, it might need to be noon or midnight or whatever. Like it might need to take a little bit longer. The key is to always strive to get a little bit better and a little bit faster and a little bit more efficient. Another thing to note with all of this is that we really need to get in the practice of writing things down, getting them out of your head and onto a piece of paper or of some type or onto your phone, wherever you take your notes. But this is true in the hospital. This is true in your life outside of the hospital. So as I mentioned, like I would get so overwhelmed because everything was just floating around in space. Like I had all these tasks I knew I was supposed to do, and it felt like I had so much that I would get extraordinarily overwhelmed. And for my personality, I'll just shut down, which is very unhelpful when you have things to do. So one of the things that always makes me feel better, but I forget every time until I have to remind myself, is to write things down. Because when things are in your brain and they're just kind of floating, it feels like there's so much. And it always feels better to write it down because you can see it. You can see the whole picture. You can see the tasks that have to get done. And 90% of the time, it feels less overwhelming because you know it's all down. You've got it there. You can see it. It's okay. Like you can manage this. It's when it's all floating around and we can't even define what we have to do or what needs to get done that it feels like it's too much. This is super true for things like finances as well. For me, if I'm just thinking about my bills and I'm thinking about, am I, living within my means? Am I living outside of my means? Am I behind on that bill? Am I not saving enough for retirement? Whatever. If all I am doing is thinking about all of that, it's so overwhelming and crushing. It's not until I sit down in front of a computer and fill out the spreadsheet that we use, or just kind of talk about, here are the bills, here's when they're due, here's what we owe, here's what debt we have, here's what we're putting in retirement. Like once we write it down, it feels so much more manageable and it just feels better because I can breathe. It's not just taking up all of the space in my brain. Now I have space in my brain to consider how to handle the things that I need to get done. And this is extremely true for your practice as a nurse as well and your ability to manage your time. If you are just anxious about all the things you think you have to do, but you don't even know how much you have to do because it's all floating around in your head, that is going to slow you down. It's also just going to create so much anxiety that you can't even handle what you got to do. So at the beginning of your shift, write things down. Write down a list of what goals you have for your charting. Write down the tasks that you need to get done, even if you know the tasks. Especially for my new nurses, write it all down. Write the assessment. You know you have to do an assessment, but that doesn't mean you don't write it down. Write it down. Write down the emptying the Foley bag and doing the bed bath and, filling in the, getting more supplies for the suction kit or whatever it is. Write it down. Even if you know about it, It doesn't matter, because seeing it on paper and seeing it all means that you're not going to forget it when things go crazy. It means that you know exactly which steps you have to get done and things that haven't gotten done yet. Don't just rely on the power of your brain, because your brain is needed for everything else as a nurse. We need your brain performing at its best to take care of your patients, not to remember whether you got the suction kits or not. And this actually really ties right into my next tip that was really from me, but also from all of the nurses that I spoke to, especially those that have been preceptors, is really starting off strong, starting your shift off strong. And also we're going to apply this to your life. Starting your morning off strong goes a long way. But when we're talking about nursing, starting your shift strong comes down to a handful of things. So the first is obviously getting report. We need to make sure that that piece kicks us off in the right direction. And we only have so much control over the type of report that we get, because it depends on the nurse that's giving it, right? But really the key that you want to focus on is making sure that you have all of the information that you need from that nurse. Now, report etiquette is that we let them finish their statement, we let them finish giving report before you interrupt them with a bunch of questions, because I don't know how many times I would get frustrated by starting to give report and having nurses interrupt me a million times about something I was going to get to. I'm just trying to go through my process. And interruptions in report really throw you off. So try not to constantly interrupt the person giving you a report. Respect them enough to let them give you that, unless they ask you if you just have questions. But write down as they're talking, like the couple of things that you might want to know that you haven't noted yet that are important for you. So if they have already talked about neuro and they moved on to the cardiac section and you had a question about neuro, you can either ask a question if there's an appropriate moment to do so, or just note it so that you can ask it at the end of report. But make sure that you're getting the information. Do not be afraid to ask the questions, even if that nurse gets frustrated with you, because you know what, especially if you are a new nurse, just let yourself be new. Let people get annoyed with you. That's their problem. It is not yours. They have clearly forgotten what it feels like to be new. You are doing exactly what you need to. Your priority is your patient. It is not looking like you know everything or like you've got it all together for the nurses around you. It's for your patient. So ask all your questions, and also realize that if the nurse doesn't have all the answers to your questions, that's okay. If they don't have an answer, just make a note on your report sheet of things that you want to look up, things that you want to check. I actually used to just put little check boxes next to the different areas on my report sheet of things that I needed to double check. So on the area of my report sheet where there's a water flush component for tube feeds, if they weren't sure about how frequent we were supposed to do it, just put a little check box. I knew I needed to check that. So create a system that works for you, that tells your brain ooh, I need to double check this, or I have a question about this, or whatever it is. It is a lot easier to have to confirm something that you were told in report than look everything up on your own. So make sure that your important questions are always answered. Things like, when is that dressing change due? When is trach care done? When do I need to recheck their H&H because they just gave blood or they finished potassium or something? What time do I need to recheck it? Those questions are really important for you to ask so that you don't have to spend all of your time trying to look it up, because you probably won't have the time to do so. So we don't need to have that question floating around. We need a plan. And I just want to give you permission as new nurses, as nurses in your first few years, if you are nervous about asking a lot of questions because you feel like you should know all of this, you feel like this shouldn't be a question, you should have all this knowledge, I want you to just know that it's okay that you don't. Okay. It's okay that you're still learning. It's going to take you time. Maybe you're a nurse of 10 years, but you just pivoted to a brand new area. It is okay that you don't know all of that information. We cannot keep all of it in our brains. We learn our specialties and we kind of forget a lot of the rest. And that is okay, because 90% of the time when you are doing your specialty, you know your stuff and you learn new things every once in a while, but you know the core. When you pivot, when you change, or when you're just starting out, it feels scary because you don't know all of the acronyms and all of the terms that people are using or the information that you have to know. You don't know it all yet. It's okay to ask questions and it's okay to be new. Just give yourself that permission. And then just to link this to your life outside of the hospital, this same rule applies when you are just living your life as a human. Starting your day off strong is extremely valuable in making sure that you are set up for a good day. So having a solid morning routine is always very helpful. And I will never be the coach or the person to tell you that a morning routine needs to look like a 20-step skincare routine and an elaborate breakfast and yoga followed by meditation, followed by journaling, followed by breath work, and then, ice rolling. Like, I'm not going to throw all of that at you because all of that is fluff. Okay. If you have the time and space for those things and they feel good for you, great. Go ahead and do them. That's okay. But we need a basic morning routine that sets you up for success. We don't need anything elaborate. So starting off strong when it comes to your life might mean waking up without having to snooze your alarm 400 times, because that just isn't great for our brain or for our body or for our nervous system. So trying to avoid the snooze button is one great goal for all of us, because we get into a state called sleep inertia that often makes us feel more tired in the long run. Even though it feels so good to sleep for the extra 5 minutes, it actually hurts us more during the day. So trying to eliminate the snooze might be a really great goal. Maybe it's that you don't touch your phone for the first hour or half an hour that you are awake, because you're just kind of enjoying your world before letting everyone else into it. Maybe it's that you tag on a little bit of a gratitude practice while you're brushing your teeth for the 2 minutes so that you can kind of start your day off with some positivity. Maybe it's that you focus on getting a good high protein breakfast so that you stabilize your blood sugar and kind of kickstart your energy for the day and make sure that you feel full and satisfied until lunch. Like, those are the kind of components that we can really focus on having to start our day off strong. And then we're going to talk about building a plan for your day. That's the other part of starting off strong. And that can go right into this morning routine. So in your life, we should also have a general plan. Now, again, I hate extremes. And so I don't want you to have a plan for every hour, every moment of your day, unless that works for you. There's some people out there that works for. But I think for the vast majority of us, we need like a plan with flexibility. And this is extremely true for nursing too. So we'll talk about that. But we need a plan with flexibility. So in your life outside of the hospital, it's that today I want to get done these 2 or 3 tasks. And outside of that, I'm flexible. So I need to get these high priority items done. And outside of that, I'm going to fill my time with other things that may be important or maybe tasks that I'd like to get done, but they are extras. I got my core pieces identified, but I can be flexible, because if you have kids, if you have a dog, if you've got a family, if you have other responsibilities like any other human outside of just yourself, we need that flexibility built in. So identify a few pieces that make up a solid morning routine for you that makes you feel energized at the beginning of your day, and then create a plan for your day that is flexible but gives you some structure, because that's going to set you up for success. Now, segueing right back into nursing, the same goes for that. We need a plan at the start of our shift, and that is based on our assessment, that is based on our report. That is the information that we can take and then generate into a general plan that has flexibility. Now, as a caveat, if you head right into a train wreck, if your patient is coding or something bad is happening, or you walk into something that's a mess at the beginning of the shift, your priority is to put out that fire. Of course, we don't need to stop and try and plan for our shift. That's not going to happen on those days. That will happen sometimes. But we're talking about a regular shift where you start out with just a basic report. Everyone is stable enough that you have a few moments to figure out a good plan for your day. That's what we're talking about here. So get your report. Go see your patients with the nurse, send the nurse off. I like to do like a quick and dirty assessment on those patients to make sure I know what's going on. There's nothing pressing with them. And then I let them know that I'm going to go look over the charts and I'll be right back to see them. So this is going to be different depending on what unit you work on, but come up with a system of the things that you need to know right off the bat. So for me, it was always that I would look at their last labs. I would go through all of their orders and focus on the things that I had questions about during my report, and focus on the things that I know are going to happen during my shift. So if there were a couple boxes like water flushes, etc., that I knew I needed to check, double check those. But then I'd also look for things like Q2 or Q4 orders. I know that's going to happen on my shift. So I'm going to make note of those. And on my report sheet on the back, I had like a time grid with some blocks. And that is when I would make notes of when I have to get things done, what my goals are, what time I want to get them done. So figure out when things need to get done and then set goals as well. So make sure that we have a goal for when we want assessments charted. Make sure we have a goal for when we want to get something like a bed bath done or whatever it is by the time we want our med passes complete, whatever. Set some goals there so that you can work to try and improve your time management enough to hit those goals. And this is also going to be extremely important for you to establish your own shift routine. So this is going to help you figure out when you like to get all your labs done by, when you like to get your bed baths done, when you like to have your charting done. All of that is going to mean that you have a plan going into every shift, and then it just becomes easier because you've now streamlined your process and it's yours. That also is empowering for many of us new nurses to know that we have created a plan for our nursing care and we know how it gets done. So come up with that plan for your shift, but be flexible, because we all know that we can plan until the cows come home, but that doesn't mean that that's how the shift's going to go. Things happen, crap hits the fan, like things go wrong. So we have to be able to be flexible within that plan, but it's good to have the plan in place at least so that we know maybe what we could delegate. We know what still needs to get done after we manage an issue that happened. Okay, last piece I want to touch on is clustering care. And again, we're going to tie this back to your life outside of the hospital too. But these are the top things that I got from every nurse that I talked to was starting off strong, was setting goals for your shift, writing things down, and clustering care. Like all of those together and kind of how they weave together are the big pieces of advice that I got, and also what was helpful for me as a nurse when I was starting out with time management, because we could talk about a billion things with this topic, but these are the big pieces that you want to master initially, and you want to master when you make a pivot or when you make a change. Like these skills are useful regardless of how long you have been a nurse. This is probably the change that took me, or the skill that took me the most time to learn, the most time to master. And it's one of the most important when it comes to time management, because there's nothing that slows you down like having to go back into a room 10 times because you keep forgetting little things. So I don't know how many times I would be like charting, especially in the beginning. I'd be charting my assessment and be like, I didn't even feel their pedal pulses. Or I'm charting and I'm like, I didn't even flush that IV. Do I have a line that works? Like I would find all of these questions as I went through the charting process that I didn't check. And so I would get up from my seat, run into the room, check that thing, sit back down, realize I didn't check this other thing, run into the room, check that thing, sit back down. Now somebody's call bell's on. Now a doctor's asking for something. Like you can get thrown in a million different directions if you don't have a good process. And this goes back to the skill we just talked about, like streamlining your nursing care and coming up with a way that you deliver care in a consistent way is extremely helpful for preventing this issue and really mastering clustering care. Like that comes with becoming more confident in your ability to care for your patients as a nurse and developing your own routine. Like that'll get better. But there are things that we can start to practice right away that'll improve this skill. So even in the example that I just covered, so charting and realizing, oops, I forgot pedal pulses, run into the room, fix that, figure out what it is, chart it, scroll down a little bit, found I forgot something else, run into the room. Like even just in that example, in any task that you are doing, try and complete that task and write down anything else that you need to get done with it or that you might have forgotten. And at the end of the task, you go in and you get those pieces of information so that instead of getting up from my chair 10 times because I forgot 10 little pieces of my assessment, I now have a list of those 10 things. And so at the end, when I've charted everything else, I can run into the room, look up those or do those quick assessments and put that information in instead of getting up and down a billion times. In reality, try and make it a goal that you never go into a patient's room for one thing and do one thing. Always try and take care of 3 or 4 things every time you go into a patient's room. So if you're going to go into a patient's room every 2 hours to turn them, that's also the time that we could empty their Foley bag, refill supplies in the room, get their labs if that's the time for it. Could we match up a blood sugar with that time that we're turning them? Like, could we brush their hair? Like anything that we can do to cluster the care, to put more pieces together means that we will be more efficient with our time instead of running in there every 5 minutes. And also that means that we can ask a patient if they're awake and aware, we could ask them if they need anything when we're in there so that we don't have to leave the room and then they realize they need something 5 minutes later. Sometimes we can't prevent it. But if we can try and get more things done every time we step into a patient's room, it means that we will have to be in there less frequently, and that's better for everyone. I always used my whiteboard for this. So every time I'd go in the room, especially at the beginning of my shift, when I would do my initial assessment, I would also be making note of things that I needed in my room or supplies that were running low or whatever. And I'd use my whiteboard all the time for this, where I would have a little list at the edge of the whiteboard so that I could even just see it from the outside of the room of the things that I needed the next time I came into that room. So instead of waiting to run out of suction supplies or whatever it was, or graduated cylinder or whatever I needed, I would write it down on the board ahead of time so that the next time I'm going to walk into that room, I see the list and I'm like, ooh, you know what? I'm going to grab these 4 things and then my room's going to be stocked. Use your whiteboard, use visual cues. Because if you're anything like me and maybe have a little bit of an ADHD brain, we need the visual reminders, because I will forget altogether that I needed that because I was focused on my other patient, or I was focused on doing something else for a minute. And that other patient, I'm not thinking about the fact that they needed more chucks in their room. Like, we need visual reminders. So use your whiteboard, write things down, the things that you want to get done the next time you're in that room, so that we can start to group our care and cluster our care so that it's more efficient and better for everyone around. This is going to come with time, but start practicing and just recognizing different scenarios where you could have actually done something else while you were doing this, or the opportunities that exist for clustering care. Observe other nurses around you and how they seem to cluster care. So if you're going to put in an IV, for example, I never thought about this in the beginning, but if you're putting in an IV, can you also just draw your labs at the same time because you have a fresh line? Like, can we just put those 2 tasks together so that we aren't just putting the IV in and then an hour later coming in and drawing labs? Like, we could have done it all together. If you're going into suction, could you also just start the bed bath and then tell your tech, like, can you come in 15 minutes and help me finish the bed bath? And then that piece is done. It feels so much better to get these pieces done if we can just do them all together. And also remember that as a nurse, your job is not just about completing tasks. It's always about what is best for your patient. It's about critical thinking. It is about much more than just tasks. I think when we first start as nurses, we are very task-oriented, and that makes sense because we're new, we're worried about the tasks, and we've kind of been told that those are what's important. But really, we have to step back and understand that we'll get the task done, but we also need to look at our patients and understand what they need from us. What are the most important things for them? What could go wrong during my shift? What things might this patient experience during my shift that I could prepare ahead of time for? So maybe you're looking at something like their H&H, right? You looked at those labs in the beginning of the shifts and you notice that they are trending down. Is that something that we can then keep in our mind and say, could I watch that more closely? Should I be looking for these assessment pieces that indicate that they might have a low H&H? So mastering time management is a skill that we need, but we have to be able to always be looking at the bigger picture, even when we're practicing these skills. Like, yes, we're going to cluster care, but also, does our patient just look off? Like, I of course, we want to try and get 3 or 4 tasks done when we're in the room, but are you ignoring basic things about your patient because all you're worried about is the task? I'm not trying to say that to freak you out. You will get this down, I promise. But I always want you to remember that you are their nurse first. It's not just about the time management. It's not just about the tasks and checking a box and charting the assessment. It's about that patient and noticing what they need from you or what is changing about them, trends, and also just learning to trust your gut as a nurse, which is a skill that takes some time. We'll talk about that piece too, but zoom out and notice the big picture, even when you're focused on mastering something like time management. This can also apply at home 1,000%, because how many times have we gone out of the house to do groceries and then we get home and we're like, oh, we could have, gotten a car wash. We could have gone to the doctor. We could have done this task or that task. Like, how many times could we have utilized clustering care in our lives outside of being a nurse? And this is true for your days off. If you're a busy nurse, clustering care or clustering tasks, I guess we should call it outside of the hospital, that could save you during your shifts off. Because if you can be more efficient on the few days that you have off, It means that you'll have more space for going out on a hike and doing the things that you love and going to a movie or spending time doing date night or whatever. You're going to have more time to decompress. And that is extraordinarily important for every nurse, every caregiver out there. So clustering care might mean that we group a bunch of things into going out. Like if we're going to go out and run errands, let's run all of the errands. If you're going to make one meal for yourself, if you're cooking lunch, like can we cook 3 more meals while we're already cooking? Like that is a huge skill that we can all take when it comes to meal prepping. It doesn't have to be this elaborate 4-hour thing on a Sunday. It's that every time you make a meal, can you make 2 or 3 of those meals so that you just have them in the fridge and they're ready to go? That's going to save you so much time. So think about that skill and applying it to your life outside of the hospital. So cluster your tasks basically so that you can be more efficient and also stay in a similar mindset. So for me, I often call this batching in my life, but batching content or batching podcast or batching coaching is really helpful because it means that my brain can focus on the same type of task for a longer period of time. Instead of having it be like one day I'm doing a podcast and then I have a coaching call and then I'm making some content and then I am jumping on Instagram or I'm in a Facebook group or whatever. Like I'm not bouncing around all the time. Instead, I have a podcast day where I might be researching and then recording the podcast. Maybe I record more than one, or I throw an interview in on that day. Whatever it is, I like to try and do the same type of tasks for at least a chunk of time or a block or a full day. Cluster your tasks or batch them to make you more efficient, which will enable you to feel more free. I know that this can feel kind of like a box, but time management really gives us the structure we need to actually have more freedom in our days. So apply this in the hospital, apply this at home, and know that you are not alone. That's the last thing I want to leave you with here. I could talk about time management for days, and we can always have a second episode on this, but know that you are not alone. As a nurse or as a human at home, you do not have to do it all by yourself. Asking for help is another piece that's always going to help with managing your time, being more efficient, anything, but also just keeping your sanity. You are not the only person there to care for your patients. They are your patients, and so they're your responsibility when you are working as a nurse. But that doesn't mean that nobody's going to help you. It doesn't mean that everyone else on that unit doesn't care about your patient too. You have resources and you have team members to lean on. Use them. And don't be ashamed because you think you should be able to handle it all on your own. Delegate, ask for help, use your teammates because they're going to use you too. As they get to know you and as they have confidence in you, they're going to ask you for help all the time. Nursing is a team sport. It is not just a solo thing that you have to worry about. We're all doing this together. And that's the same at home. I don't want you to feel like you are the only one that has to do everything. Maybe you are single. And maybe you have kids to take care of and it feels like it's all on you. Know that you have people who love you, who would help you if you asked them. I want to be that for you if that's what you need. Like know that I am a resource even if you feel like you have nobody else. You can reach out to me. We can have time to talk about things, debrief, vent, whatever it is that you need to give better care, but also care for yourself better. That is what's important. Anyways, my friends, I could talk about this till the end of time, but this is already a longer episode. I knew it was going to be. With time management, you can go off in so many different directions, but I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you could just pick up a few little pieces that you can take into your day, take into your life, and start to apply to see where you can actually create pockets of time that you have freedom. Because if we aren't spending all of our time running around like a chicken with our head cut off, or all of our time drowning in anxiety, we actually can do the things that we care about. We can actually deliver better care. We can become a better nurse, a better person, if we actually take care of the things that we need to and have space to replenish and decompress as we need to as well. So take these skills, try them out. Let me know what works for you, what doesn't. If there are skills that you know are helpful for you, like share them with me. Go on over to Instagram, shoot me a message, and just let me know what's helpful. And I'll share that with the group too, because we can all learn from each other. I appreciate the heck out of you. I will see you in a week. We'll chat more about another topic. If you have suggestions or things you'd like to hear on the podcast, let me know. We are just restarting this podcast, which is the coolest thing ever, but it means that we have such an intimate group that you have a direct line to me. You can ask me whatever you need. So take advantage and let's make this podcast exactly what you are looking for, because you are my number one priority. So I love you guys. I am rooting for you. If you are a new nurse, know that you are doing an incredible job and you've got this. I promise. You are already an amazing nurse. Even if nobody's told you that today, I will tell you that. I'll see you next week, my friend. Thank you so much for listening in. I hope you got exactly what you needed from today's episode. If it resonated with you, it would mean so much if you would share it with a fellow healthcare worker who might love it too. That way we can continue to grow our community of like-minded nurses and healthcare workers who are ready to heal healthcare from the ground up. And make sure you're following over on Instagram at Health Coach for Nurses for even more support and value. I've got your back. I am rooting for you, and I will see you in the next episode.